Okay, we are theoretically now recording.
Yep, okay, I see it.
You say, okay, you see the little button that says we're recording?
Yes.
Okay, good. Then we're recording. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Now, this is the second in a series, and we're going to end up doing about 6 of these. And basically, what we're doing is we're just walking down the second page of the 1004 form, looking at the adjustments more or less in the order they are in the form. And one of the reasons we're doing that is simply because as you work your way down the form, the adjustments become less cut and dried and more subjective. So some of the things we're going to look at today are fairly straightforward, fairly clear. Some of the stuff we're going to look at today and in the upcoming presentations are a little bit less so. And I don't know if all of you heard our conversation earlier with Lauro. Um, Adjustments by their very nature are subjective. And so what we're trying to do is show you a whole bunch of ways to come up with adjustments in an attempt to move their subjectivity out of them. What we're going to find is even when we've got lots of data, the best you can come up with is a range. So as a result, we're gonna come up with a relatively tight range, but it's still part of our scope of work to decide where within that range we're going to make the adjustment.
Tim, can
So
I interrupt you for just a minute? Technical
interrupt
thing.
away. I'm married. Go ahead.
I think we need to turn off everybody's microphones because it's getting hard to listen. There's some kind of feedback somewhere. So if everybody turned off their mics, or if you can control that, Tim, I'm not sure, but
Okay, we muted everybody's mics. Now, what you need to do if you want to comment, just press the space bar and hold it. Press the space bar and hold it, and you'll be able to talk. And when you let go of the space bar, that will return to the mute function. Excuse me. All right. Before we get going, we want to come up with a definition of location. And as we refer to location, we're not referring to site and view yet. That is the next presentation. So this one is just location. And this is basically where the property sits on the planet relative to linkages. So again, we're not looking at site and view today. We will be looking at those in the future. We're just looking at the four corners of the property and where they are on the planet. So what we're going to accomplish today is we're going to come up with a location adjustment. We're going to come up 4 different ways or 5 different ways, which means we're going to have market support for it. We're going to talk about communicating what we did and the how we came up with the adjustment, how we communicated that to the client. We're going to talk a little bit about bias and how properly made adjustments help eliminate bias. And then we're going to go in for a review of everything we've spoken about today. Now, remember, if you have any questions, please go ahead and raise your hand. Don't hesitate to do that. We're happy to take questions. And let's see. Okay, let's see. Let me read a couple of comments here. Hi, Mark. Let's see. Ed, you said we're breaking up. Are you still having that problem, Ed? That may be Facebook. Um, it also could be the fact that I'm not talking into my microphone properly. So I'll see if I can remedy that fact. Is that any better? Okay. And Carmen indicated, what is that password again? That password is capital D as in Delta, E as in Echo, B as in Bravo, DEB. And when Scott sends this stuff out to you later today, it will be unlocked, but you just got the password anyway. And just between all of us, it'll probably stay the same password for the rest of the stuff we do in the rest of this presentation. And just so you'll know, Debbie is my wife. Okay. Let's see. Let's go back here. All right. Now, today's analytics. We're going to look at paired sales data, and a lot of people say that this is the gold standard. Okay, maybe, but we all know it has a paired sales analysis has certain strengths and weaknesses. We're going to look at grouped, we're going to look at paired adjusted data and grouped data. And quite frankly, there's not that much difference, but we're going to walk through it so it's clear what it is and how to use them. We're going to look at secondary data. Now, secondary data is data that somebody else comes up with. You don't. Somebody else comes up with it. And then the biggest question is, okay, is it market specific enough to use? And that's a scope of work decision that the appraiser has to make. And then we're going to talk about sensitivity analysis. Now, we want to make clear with sensitivity analysis, everybody has to understand this. That might be an adjustment procedure of last resort, frankly. And what it means is, much like paired sales data, when you're dealing with sensitivity analysis, you have to understand that it isolates only one difference. It cannot isolate two or more differences. So, and you'll see that when we get to that point in the presentation. So we're going to start out using simple paired sales. Now, this is probably what your 1004 drop-down menu looks like as you're trying to isolate the location of your subject. Uh, so everybody should be familiar with this. Now, when we get into MLS data, we're using Scott's MLS data from Minneapolis, but this is not MLS. This is the 1004 form. So this should be familiar to everybody. Now, when we're dealing with paired sales, we can deal only with one difference because that's all we can isolate from this type of analysis. We don't get into full multivariable regression analysis in this presentation for a number of reasons. And one of them, the biggest one, is typically in real estate appraisal, unless you're dealing with a property, say in a condo project or a townhouse project, there are so many differences that regression analysis doesn't work real well. So that's one of the reasons we don't get into it. So as a result, we've got to have similar GLA, similar age and condition, similar quality, similar site size, similar car storage, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And these similarities are going to have to be present, whether you're dealing with relatively inexpensive properties or relatively expensive properties. In other words, we're trying to get down to one difference. That's what we're trying to isolate. Now, Scott took this directly from his data. So, Scott, why don't you run through this one? Let's see, Scott, you got to unmute yourself. There you go.
All right, this is on the far left here. What I do is I type in the whole MLS number just so I can identify that property. So here's a property on a residential street that has a value of 315, and to me that means after concessions. Another property on a busy road at 300,000. So it's pretty simple here. You just subtract, and the adjustment is $15,000. And this is an example that you won't find very often, if at all. To me, I don't know how to search for pairs with only one difference. So that's why we have other options.
Now, we raised the question, this question has been raised, is paired sales analysis market support? And the answer to that question is yes, it is, but. And the but is it enough market support? Now, if you, as the appraiser, were to take a look at this and say, yeah, I'm really happy with a $15,000 adjustment, and given these prices, that's about 5%. If you were real happy with that, you could stop right there, frankly. Make the location adjustment at $15,000 or 5% or whatever it is you're going to go, either of those you're going to go with, and move on. However, now let's get some discussion on this. What, excuse me, what is the strength of this type of analysis? And then we're going to compare that with what is the weakness of this type of analysis. So let's start with the strength. What is the strength of this type of analysis? Just press your space bar and jump in there. And remember, you don't want Scott or me to have to dance or tell jokes.
Well, if I'll start out here, I would say that the strength of this is that it is direct. And the weakness is that it is not accessible. We don't find them very often.
Yeah, the strength is, yeah, you got a house on a busy street and a house on a residential street. So therefore, you've isolated one difference. But then is that the market's reaction to that difference, or is that the reaction solely of these two sales? So again, the appraiser has a judgment call to make. Stop here or move on. So the next one is a location adjustment using adjusted pairs. Okay, Scott, go ahead.
All right, so now here we've got, again, two different MLS numbers. We've got a house on a residential street that has a value 321. It has a garage adjustment. It has one more garage, so we need to take that garage value out, and we'll get into how to make a garage adjustment later on. So the adjusted value here is 315. This house is on a busy road, but it needs a GLA adjustment. And again, we will get into how to do that. So it adjusts to 300, and we're back to this $15,000 adjustment. Now this is an example, you know, as someone writing a course, I get to make numbers up, right? So these first two were made up numbers, but from now on, when we get to the next one, that's actual data from the market. And that's just a kind of a way for me to emphasize that I rarely find these. I don't know how to look for them. If I find them, it's kind of like I stumbled upon them. So to me, these are two direct ways. This is less direct because we've got adjustments involved, but neither of them are very accessible.
There's a story told, two older appraisers were having lunch, and one said to the other one, "You've heard of paired sales?" And the other one said, "Yeah." And the first guy said, "Yeah, I found one." So you'll get that later and laugh and laugh. But the point is, paired sales are hard to find, as Scott has indicated. So what this is, Ryan, I'm glad you like that one. Thank you very much. Okay. So what this is saying is, okay, if you can't get this part, which is a pure pairing, okay, then go here, which is less pure because you've got to kick out a couple of differences. But when you kick out the difference in GLA and garage, the only difference remaining is the difference in residential street versus busy road. And you get the adjustment here of about $15,000. Okay, that's perfectly acceptable, assuming you can get the data, which is probably its biggest weakness. Assuming you can get the data, that may not be possible. So let's look at grouped data. Now, what we're saying here is we're trying to find two groups of sales, one with what we're trying to isolate, one without. So using the group data, we can isolate that one difference. In this case, we're looking for a location on a busy road versus a location not on a busy road. Now, again, this comes from Scott's MLS up in Eagan, Minnesota. And Kevin, you probably know where Eagan is, but everybody else is a suburb of Minneapolis. So, Scott, why don't you explain what's going on here?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Well, Eagan is probably, if you are working in a major metro area, you're familiar with first ring suburbs and second ring suburbs. This is a second ring suburb. It was developed primarily after World War II, when there were good roads to get from the central, job markets in Minneapolis and St. Paul out past the first suburb that was built up maybe right around World War II or maybe even earlier. And then the second tier suburbs here are more like the 70s. Okay. And what you'll find is that there are busy roads, and the names here are Pilot Knob, Lexington, Black Dog Road, I think, and Diffley and Cliff Road. These are roads that used to be county roads, and they had houses built on them in the 70s. And now they have become what we call collector roads. They are not a private, quiet residential street. There's traffic. And every once in a while, you'll get an assignment on one of those busy roads, and you'll need to do an adjustment for the busy road, because you're not going to find 5 comps from the current market that are on a busy road or that are that you can compare without knowing how to make this adjustment. So what we did is I searched for Egan, and it took a 2-year time span in order to get 30 in the sample. Now, it's important to have 30. See right up here, it says 38. If you don't have at least 30, you cannot compare 2 groups statistically. So we've got these 2 groups, 38 on the busy road. And the 2 key numbers here are the median price, 305, that's the middle value. And the second key numbers to look at is how old are the houses that we're going to compare, and what is the size of the houses that we're going to compare over here under total finished square feet. So what I did after I had this data, I've got these busy road houses. Now I want to go search for single family houses in the same time period that are not on a busy road, that were built near 1973 and had about the same size. So here's what I found. I found 42, which is good. It's above 30. I went back the same time period. I'm in the same neighborhood boundaries. The median price is 322. And the key thing to me is that we're talking about the 1973 build houses again. And when I did my search, I just bracketed age by maybe 5 years either side to find this group. And lo and behold, they were very similar in size. They were a total of 2,100 square feet, and that includes basements, but that's the only way we get it from our MLS. So the key things here are, we've got 2 groups that are very similar, and the difference is the busy road, and it's 322 compared to 305. So here's our 305 on the busy road, the median. Here's the average road, 322. There's an effect of $16,785. That's the market reaction to that busy road. And it's 5.2%. 16 is 5.2% of this 322. And the reason I keep these 2 in the presentation here to show that they are similar age houses, and they're very similar in size, including basements. So to me, this is pretty strong data that we've got by group sales, we've got a 5.2% adjustment for the busy road.
Okay. Now, Scott, thank you. Let's go back and review what we did relative to the groups. Okay, in the first one, there were 38. Scott mentioned the necessity to have at least 30 sales. Yeah, just that's a statistical thing, and we can explain it if you want us to, but it's not that terribly important.
I did have one pop-up question, and
yeah,
he wants the explanation or the source for it, and we do have a source, and it was in the earlier episode, but it's a book written by, what was his name? Anyway, it's published by the Appraisal Institute.
Wolverton.
Marvin Wolverton.
Yeah.
He's an MAI and has a PhD, and he's got this 400-page book about statistics for appraisers, and he makes this statement that you need to have 30 for real estate, at least 30 in a sample to compare 2 groups, right? Group A and Group B. You need at least 30 to have statistical significance. And it actually goes back beyond just Marvin Wolverton. He's citing something called the central limit theorem, which came out of the 1880s, I think, or 1850s. But it's math. Okay. You need 30.
Scott, Wendy raised the question, did you exclude the busy road in your selection for the second group of sales?
The second group, yes. I went and did the same search, and I took out everything that was on Pilot, Knob, Lexington, Black Hawk, Diffley, and Cliff. And Wendy knows those roads. I think she's driven some of those roads, I think. So yes, the second group, I took out the busy road houses and ended up just with the infill houses that didn't have the busy road.
Let's see. Okay, Bill asked the question. Could you please expand on the preference for 30 minimum count? Again, Bill, what this comes down to is, let's face it, there is no such thing as a perfect pairing. So what you're trying to do is get as many pairs as possible, so any errors in one pair are in effect balanced out by an equal but opposite error by another pair. And the statisticians tell us that 30 will do that. Obviously, more would be better. But
yes, thank you. That was excellent. I've asked that question to a lot of people, and nobody has a source. George Dell, who I love and recommend, by the way, gave me the old "believe me, I know." And I'm just that kind of guy. I like a sauce, you know.
Okay, well, I can send me an email and I'll send you the source, but it's on my website a couple different places. And interestingly, the number of observations, they're called, in the groups, it depends on the distribution within the group, right? Is it a skewed, or is it a not a skewed? If it is a true bell curve, then you only need 15. And there's some history behind that, but according to Wolverton, we don't know the shape of that curve generally in real estate. So he thinks 30 is the minimum, but you use what you have, right?
Yeah. It's like playing poker. You either, stick with what you got, draw more cards, or fold, basically. So if you can only get 10 sales, then you can only get 10 sales. But then you might want to use sensitivity analysis, which is something, by the way, that George advocates, rather than what the rigmarole we're going through here. But again, that's your scope of work. Let's see. Then Jim asked the question, Scott, in the location group of sales, I noticed that the minimum square footage of GLA is 0. Shouldn't we scrub out that sale that has 0 for a GLA?
Well, I wasn't searching for, I guess I was searching plus or minus on the square footage. I can't remember. No, this is the busy road houses. All I searched for was busy road to find out what these other characteristics were, so I could match the search the second time around. And this is a case of an agent that didn't enter the square footage. He listed the house.
Basically, what we're looking at here, we're looking at, we're not paying that much attention to this column. We're looking at,
this was my benchmark search. I was looking for single family on busy roads, and I didn't know what it was going to tell me for their ages and their sizes, but I wanted to match those when I did the second search, excluding the busy roads.
And then Ryan asked the question, how do you get to this view in your matrix MLS?
In my MLS, there's something called statistics, I believe, or it's at the bottom of the search. But if he could send me an email, scullen2@comcast.net, I can show him how it works in mine anyway.
Yeah. Or hang on, when we're done, when we're through, Scott, we'll walk you through it individually.
Sure.
Okay. Now, Mark asked the question: 30 sales or 30 sales in each group. You're looking for 30 sales in each group. In other words, you're looking for 30 sales on a busy road. You're looking for 30 sales off a busy road, so that you can isolate the influence on value of the busy road. So, Mark, thank you for that question. I appreciate it. And then Michael said, Ryan, it's at the bottom of the single line search stats and tabular. So again, hang on after class is over and we'll go through this individually. Scott will just bring it up on a screen and show you what it is. Okay. Now, Julie asked the question, do you adjust for the differences in median GLA?
Well, that's a very good question. I didn't do it. And if we go to the next slide that summarizes, I'll tell you why.
Let's see. I think I got to go. Let's see. Whoops. Go here. And then we got to go there. Okay.
Oh, there we go. Okay. So notice that on the busy road, the finished square feet was a little bit more than on the average road. I didn't worry about that, number one, because these include basement. So yeah, maybe there's a difference. I'm not sure which is the GLA. The second reason I'm not concerned is if we did, we would have a larger adjustment. The busy group the busy road group does have 4.5% more living area, but it would not lower the, this would actually probably go down if we got it down to 2157. See what I'm saying? So I would say this is a minimum, the low end of a busy road adjustment, because they're not quite equal, but to me, they're similar enough to see this difference being accounted for by the busy road, certainly not the year built, probably not as much the finished square feet, but yeah, there's always compromises. We're looking for the best data we can find. And if we found the perfect data, that perfect pair, it would be over, right? And anybody could do this.
Let's see. Ed asked the question, is it the MLS telling you what is busy and what is not?
No, that is actually your local experience. I know the names of those busy roads. They, I just included in my search houses that were on Pilot Knob, Lexington, Black Dog, Diffley, and Cliff.
So the MLS told him, but he had to ask the MLS to look for those roads.
Right.
So that was, in other words, there was not a field to check.
No, that's the problem with.
Look
yeah, the MLS
for sales on these roads. He had to ask MLS that question specifically. And
yeah,
then
MLS.
I'm sorry, Scott, go ahead.
MLS will not let you search for different condition, different quality, different location. It's very limited in the search capabilities that match up with what we need to report. So you need to be a little creative. And in this case, I wanted an adjustment for just one of these streets, right? But I figured I'm not going to have enough sales. I'm not going to have 38 sales unless I go back 10 or 20 years. So I thought, well, I'm going to expand it out to roads that are about that busy, and try to keep it as close in time as possible. So you're watching this one, 38, you're narrowing it down on the subject characteristics as much as you can, but you're not narrowing it so much that you go below 30. That's my advice.
Jim asked the question, how far did you expand your search for busy roads?
Well, this was the city of Egan. I can't remember. Yeah, it was the whole municipality, which is about a 50,000 population area that might be 5 miles by 6 miles or something like that. So it's the same school district, it's the same municipality, but it's way beyond 1 mile, for instance.
And then Larissa asked the question, so is the only criteria entered in the query just single family homes? Then you scrub out if on a busy road or not?
Right, I looked for Egan. I gave it these street names separated by commas. And then I wanted single families, and I wanted them to close in the last 2 years, and they were sales. And that gave me this feedback, and I used this feedback to kind of structure a search for single family roads that were, or for houses that were single family, not on a busy road, that were as close as possible to 1973 and 2255.
Oh, so, in other words, there's no such thing as a perfect pairing. So we narrow the pairings down as far as possible. We get them as alike as possible. And then when we get toward the end of the presentation, we're going to look at a weighting grid. In fact, we're going to look at a series of weighting grids, and we're going to decide how much weight to give the individual value indications as part of the appraiser scope of work. Oh, let's go. We've talked about that. We've talked about that. We've talked about that. And so, in other words, what we said was, okay, we kind of like, what did it come down to, Scott? Just around 5%, 5.2%,
right?
Something along those lines. So we're looking, if you think back, we're kind of narrowing in on about 5%. Although that in and of itself may not mean anything.
The quick story. I had a mentor that was old school. He would never tell me the adjustments. He didn't have a sheet that had adjustments on it. He said he just used paired sales. And then one day I caught him off guard. We were driving comps, and we pulled over to the side of the road, and it had a yellow stripe in it. It was kind of a busy road, but it wasn't, crazy busy. And I said, Jim, how much is the adjustment for the busy road on this house? And he kind of winked and looked at me and said, 5% for that yellow line. So appraisers know these things, right? He had learned that over time, but we need to quantify it nowadays.
Yeah,
So
unfortunately, we got to quantify them now.
right. So now we're going to get into a location adjustment using secondary data. And as Tim said, secondary data is data that you do not collect, but it's provided by a data service. So
keep going, Scott. You're doing great.
All right. So here, what we did is we took a survey. I've sent out surveys to people that use our software. And we said, okay, assume you have a $300,000 house that has frontage on a busy 40-mile-per-hour road. What do you think would be the adjustment for the busy road? So we had 76 people in the survey. The mean of their response was 13,756. Very close to the median, very close to the mode. So I think it's a pretty good number, but I want to use the mean. And the reason I do is because I am trying to pattern this after some work that was done back in the early 20th century called Wisdom of Crowds. And if we have time, we'll get into more explanation on that. But the important thing is, what I did is I divided 13,756 by 300 to get a percentage. I'm not saying that it only works for $300,000 houses. I'm saying that it's a percentage based on dividing this by this with the assumption that the percentage will hold up over different price categories. Now, in my experience as an appraiser, the lower the value of a house, the less it's impacted by things like a freeway or a busy road. The more expensive a house, the more it's affected, because people that have a high budget don't want to have a busy road, right? I guess Graceland is on a busy road now. I've seen Graceland once. That used to be a skinny little road before Elvis built his mansion there, I think, or bought the mansion. But here is a comp sale of $300,000. This is a 4.3% adjustment, okay? So 1290, it's 287. Again, wait a second. We've got something wrong here, 4.3 and 4.6. If the subject is on a residential street and a comp is on a busy road, multiply the sale price of the comp by whatever that percentage is, and I think it's 4.6, but I'm not sure, so that might be a typo.
Yeah,
but anyway,
a typo because I typed it. Yeah,
I'm taking this percentage. So 13,756 divided by 300 is the percentage adjustment. So now we're getting into a percentage adjustment for location based on a survey of 76 appraisers. Now, the interesting thing about these surveys is that according to Francis Galton, who is the guy that invented regression, right? He's a smart guy. He invented the median. He invented the term central tendency. But Galton says that many estimates of non-experts that understand the question, but they're not local experts, they will have a better, more accurate answer than one local expert. And I can show you the source for that later on, but I'm just following his lead and saying that if you have the mean divided by this, you've got a percentage now that you can use as a clue to an adjustment, but it's only one clue, right? It's a very quick, easy clue, but it's only one clue.
Just so you'll know, these gray stripes over here, these were statistical words like skewness and heteroscedicity and stuff like that that don't mean anything to us. So we blacked them out, so there was not a question on them. Now, let's take a look at the time adjustment. Okay, now, Scott, go ahead. Or excuse me, I'm sorry. It's sensitivity adjustment. I'm sorry.
Sensitivity analysis. Okay, and this is included in your workbook. But what we're doing here, we're using an independent variable. We're saying 1 for not on a busy road. Or wait, how do we do this?
1 is a busy road.
We've got 1s and
0 is not on a busy road.
1 is a busy road. Okay, 1 is a busy road, 0 is an average road. So we these are called dummy variables. So 101010, well, anyway, 101010. And these are the adjusted sale prices of these houses. We've adjusted for GLA, we've adjusted for condition, quality, age, all the adjustments are made, and we're left at the bottom of the grid with adjusted sale prices of 303, 311, etc. Well, what we do is we plot those in a grid, and it finds the best fit line between those dots. Each dot is a sale, right?
Yeah. This is a simple regression line. We didn't want to complicate it with other stuff. So this is a simple regression line that,
Right.
that any spreadsheet will do for you.
So the key things here are that this number up here in 9333, that is the adjustment that's inferred by this data. $9,333, and this is the strength of the correlation between a busy road and an average road, again, based on this data. So
Yep.
There's a 75% R-square value. That's called the coefficient of correlation. And Tim, you might want to explain what that is. But
what that means is this $9,300 basically explains 75% of the differences between these sales. In other words, there is stuff in here that has affected the individual sales prices other than busy road versus not busy road. However, through our efforts as appraisers, we have not been able to discover them. Therefore, they're still there. They're a minor contaminant. But what we're saying is, okay, this $9,300 explains 75% of the difference. Okay, that's good enough. I'll go with that. In other words, you got two aces in your hand, and maybe you can draw a couple of wild cards and then end up with a straight. But for what we do for real estate appraisal, a 75% correlation, and that's just what we're going to call it, a 75% correlation is pretty good. And it gives us reason to trust the data. It gives us reason to believe that getting to this adjusted sales price, in other words, we've made all the adjustments, but busy road versus not busy road. We've probably handled the biggest differences. Could we fine tune it? Very possibly. But at this point, we're not going to, because the 75% correlation is probably good. Let's see. Donna asked the question. I missed the code for the workbook. Can you resend it, Donna? The code is a capital D as in Delta, E as in Echo, B as in Bravo. And then Peggy said, how did you select these sales? Are they the comparables? Yes, these are the comparable sales. These are comparable sales. They've been adjusted for every possible difference except busy road versus not busy road.
right,
So
what I'm talking about here is these are comps 1 through 6 in your grid. They're very handy to use because you've already made all the adjustments that you can develop by other means. And you're looking for that last adjustment. You're wondering, okay, what is the effect of the busy road? Is there an effect? Is it something that I need to adjust? And I'll show some examples a little bit later when I pop open the spreadsheet. But what we did here is we saw that there seemed to be a correlation between a busy road and a quiet road. And we found that correlation. It's a 75% correlation. And the amount is $93 or $9,300 is the adjustment. If you put this $9,300 adjustment in, you will end up with a very tight range in your adjusted sale prices.
Chris, welcome. We're glad you're with us. It's a pleasure to see you. Thank you very much. All this stuff down here is just this math. And a lot of times people see the Y and the X and they say, oh, that's algebra. And they get all upset. Yes, it's algebra, but here's the math. And all it says is Y, which is this line over here. In other words, it's the answer you're looking for, is equal to minus $9,334 times either 1 or 0 plus $315,000. And that $315,000 is something the computer generates. We don't have to. And what that says is no matter what, a property is worth at least that much money. Okay. And then you're going to adjust from that point. So here's the math down here. $9,300. Let's see. Lauro said I was taught the R squared should be close to 1. Lauro, it should be, quite frankly. That would be the ideal.
Right. I can give you a rule of thumb. If you have below 0.4, that's a low correlation, and above 0.7 is considered a high correlation. So if you're in the mid range, that's kind of an either or. And there's another question that popped up. If this is less than 0.4, like if this is 0.3 or 0.2, somebody asked, does this then show that you would not make the adjustment? And I would say yes.
Yeah, that's exactly what it means.
Yeah.
And, you know, the question comes up, well, how do I know when to make an adjustment? Well, here's how to answer the question.
And we'll show that when we pop open this.
You don't make the adjustment.
Right.
You got a high correlation, you make the adjustment. Then Jen said, if your R squared is low, does that mean the busy road is not impacting the sales price? It could. It could also mean that there is so much other data still left in here that you can't isolate the busy road. So as one of the joys of statistics, sometimes it's difficult to tell what it tells us. Given the fact that this is 75%, chances are that, yep, the $9,300 is due to the busy road. If this was, say, 25%, then this $9,300 is due to the busy road plus something else, and maybe even plus something else. So we would have to refine the data even further. But given we've got a 75% correlation, that works. It's okay for what we do. It's okay. Lauro, should it be close to 1? Yeah, it should be. But you'll never see that in real estate. Yeah, it'll never happen, because real estate is just too varied and too different, and especially residential real estate, because there's too much emotion involved. And, you know, how many times have you seen where, you know, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer buy because their brother-in-law lives next door? You know, how do you quantify that? So
Will has a very good question here. He's asking, how many data points do we need to do this type of analysis? And the answer to that, back when I started studying regression, I was asking that question: how much data do we need? How many observations to do regression? And it turns out the answer is, it depends. It depends on the dispersion of the data, right? If you're doing a paired sale, you're saying you only need 2 points of data, right? If you're doing an adjusted pair, you only need 2. Here we're taking adjusted pairs on steroids, right? Here's pair 1, here's pair 2, here's pair 3, here's pair. So there's a bunch of pairs of adjusted sales here. So that's really what this is it's how many pairs would that be? 1 versus 2, 1 versus 3, 1 versus 4, 1 versus 5, 1 versus 6, 2 versus 3, etc. So there's, what you're doing here is multiplying adjusted pairs by a power of something. But we can get into that a little bit more when we have the actual spreadsheet doing its thing on the screen in front of us.
Yeah, hang around until after we're done,
right?
And we'll go a little bit more into why we tend to stay away from statistics. And the reason is because statistics tends to deal with samples taken from a universe. And in many cases, we're not dealing with samples. We're dealing with the entire universe of data. So I don't want to get into that here, but if you want to hang around afterwards, yes, we will be happy to get into that. Okay. Now, this is what we meant when we talked about an iteration of the weightings. These are all the same. These are the indications of a location adjustment that we took from all the data that we went through. Now, this first table weights everything at 20%. In other words, you add all these up and you divide by 5. Okay. That would be a location adjustment equals 4.54%. This one is just, I think Scott and I just played around and threw numbers in here. But the point is, we've weighted them differently. And when you weight them a little bit differently, you get 4.39%. Now, in this one, we gave the secondary data very little weight, simply because it's secondary data. And it comes from people. This is a property in Eagan, Minnesota, but the results of the secondary data came from people all over the country. So as a result, that may not be the best indication. So we gave it relatively little weight. Well, down here, we gave, 40% weight to adjusted pairs because that was right out of the market. I mean, you don't get, Bill said, Bill had to run. So, Bill, thank you for being here. We appreciate it. It's tough to get data better than data right out of the market. So we gave it 40% weight in this particular case. And that indicated a 4.44% adjustment for location. And in this one, we gave secondary data even less. We gave adjusted pairs 35%, group 25%, and sensitivity 25%, came up with 4.47. The point is what you do, and we're going to show you this, we're going to show this to you in a minute when we get into the spreadsheet itself. We're going to show you how to do this. But what happens is you do this maybe 10 times with different weights each time. And you say, how do you weight it? However you want to weight it. Whatever, it's Wednesday and you had Thai food for lunch. Okay, that means the group data gets 18%. I mean, whatever it is you like throwing in there, throw in there. And then you look at these, and what you find after a while is they start to center. And these sort of kind of center around 4.4%. So you like 4%? Okay. You like 4.4%? Okay. You like 4.5%? Okay. You like 5%? Okay, it's there. Paired sales is 5.3. Well, it's there. That's the appraiser's judgment call. And then somebody calls you on and says, well, how did you come up with a 4.5% or 4.4% location adjustment? You show them this right here. Hello. And these centered around 4.4%. Therefore, I went with it. Now, could Laurel like 4.5% and Jamie like 4.4%? Sure. But that doesn't mean either one of them's wrong. In fact, they're both right, because here they've just supported not only the component data, but they've also supported their final conclusion of the adjustment. So what we're trying to get at here is there isn't a right answer. As Scott said, so many things in appraising just depend. There's no right answer. There's the answer you can support out of the market. And this looks a whole lot like 4.4% or 4.5% or 4% or 5%, because those are what the data tell you. 6% you probably couldn't support. 3% maybe, but that looks a little light given everything else. But 4.5%, 5%, that looks to be right there. Scott, any more comments on this?
Well, we're titling this USPAP compliant adjustments. And to me, the key thing is that USPAP tells us to use a recognized method and to do it credibly. So these are recognized methods published in the Appraisal Real Estate 15th edition and its predecessor volumes. And then using it credibly, to me, means understanding enough of statistics to not go and try to infer something from a sample that's too small or too varied. So that's why I keep pounding away on this. You got to have 30 sales in each group to do group data. And then when it gets to secondary data, like Tim said, this is not from your current market. Sensitivity analysis, I tend to like this more and more because we've already adjusted the properties for everything else. And depending on how well you feel about the adjustments, how well that worked, then you can use sensitivity analysis for that one last adjustment. And we'll show you that.
Now, does everybody see the math? In other words, we took 5.13%, which was the indication from paired sales, multiplied it by 20% to get 1.03%. And then 4.54 is nothing more than the mathematical total of that column. Everybody, any questions on that? Okay, so Jim asked the question, so if you don't have any paired sales, you would just leave that off and go with whatever methods you had?
Right. To be, I mean, in my appraisal business, the first thing I do is I use secondary data. And if there's no other adjustments beyond, I mean, I start with things that we're going to cover later, like depreciated cost and so on. But I use sensitivity analysis and secondary data because they're so accessible.
But Jim, that's right. That's why we went through 5 of these, because are you going to have all 5 in every one? No, you're not. So as a result, this is a menu from which you can choose. And even if you ended up with only 2 of them, well, okay, you've got 2 of them and weight them and move on. So yeah, that's one of the reasons we're doing this, because you don't get this in appraisal school. This is probably the first time you've ever seen anything like this. And not that we're telling you anything new. We're not. What Scott said is this is in all the textbooks. But unfortunately, in appraisal school, they tend to talk about paired sales, which are just wonderful, assuming you can get them. But that's
Right.
that's the problem. Sometimes they're
So
really hard to get.
in my work, I use group data exclusively for finding a market time adjustment. It's great for that, but it's terrible for pretty much everything else, unless, you know, like in this case, we did find an adjustment for busy road. But you have to watch the group to make sure that they're really apples to apples in both groups. And then I use sensitivity analysis and secondary data for things that are unrelated to building categories. For those, I use depreciated cost, and that's coming up in a future episode.
Yeah, that'll be in number 5. We have not considered a depreciated cost so far, because the adjustments we're looking at don't lend themselves to that kind of an analysis. All right, then as we get toward the end of the PowerPoint, but again, we're going to go over this. We're going to go over the workbook itself, so we're not quite finished. What does an adjustment represent to the client? All right, when we say, okay, there's a 4.5% location adjustment difference, then the client has the right to expect that that statement is true and correct. And the reason it's true and correct is because we have demonstrated out of the market that it's true and correct. Now, Ed asked the question, and Scott, please handle this one. Ed asked the question, what's the difference between paired sales and adjusted pairs?
Well, in paired sales, what you've got is 2 properties that have only one difference. And in adjusted pairs, you have 2 properties for which you can adjust other differences. So like a paired sale for a busy road, let's say you've got 2 houses that are equal in every way except the busy road, that's a paired sale. If you've got 2 houses that are equal in every way except one of them has a 2-car garage and one of them has a 1-car garage, first you make the garage adjustment, and then you the rest of it is the busy road. Or maybe it's market time. First you make the market time adjustment, and then it's the busy road. So it's adjusted pairs. It means that they're adjusted for something else, like market time, a difference in a garage stall, a difference in size, you know, whatever it happens to be. But these adjustments are interactive. To me, and we're going to get to this, I like to start with the low-hanging fruit. And this is the stuff that's up higher in the tree, right?
Okay, Ed, thank you. Then we get into competency. We like our clients to believe that we're competent in what we're doing. And when we go through processes like this, we're demonstrating our competency. We're demonstrating our due diligence. We're demonstrating our USPAP compliance. We've measured all the necessary data. Remember when we looked at that 75% correlation, we'd probably make that adjustment. But if it was only a 25% correlation, we probably wouldn't make that adjustment because the market doesn't support it. Then Is the adjustment based on the highest and best use? This is really important, but it's going to become more important as we get into the discussion of the other adjustments we're going to make. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on that here. And then finally, have we properly explained to the client, which we're going to look at in a minute, have we properly explained to the client what it is we did and then how and why we did it? So this is just a review, and we're going to look at communicating this stuff to the client in a minute. And we're going to talk about bias and then have a grand review. But anyway, take a look at this. Now, please feel free to take a screenshot, whatever. We're happy to let you use this language verbatim in your reports if you want to. Please feel free to do that. So what this does is this just summarizes basically that grid. This language basically summarizes that grid. Okay, now, would you include this in your report? Yeah, if you want to. It might be a little bit too much to explain, but the language just basically goes through that grid to make it clear what it is we did. And then the next paragraph is our conclusion. So whatever it is you conclude, 4%, 4.5%, 5%, you'd go ahead and put in there. Now, this is what communicates to the client what it is we did and why it is we did it. And as we went through all that stuff before and we looked at those 4 individual weighting grids, that explains how we did what we did. So we've explained what we did, we've explained how we did it, and we explained why we did it. And then based on that, we explained why it is we came up with whatever adjustment we decided to come up with. And, 4.5%, 5%, whatever it is. Okay. Again, please feel free to copy that language into your reports if you're comfortable with that. That's fine with us. This is copyright protected, but that's fine with us if you do that. We have no problem with that. Now, we're going to take a quick look at bias, simply because that's becoming very hot right now. It's going to become hotter as time goes on. So this is how USPAP defines an appraiser, and it's one who performs valuation services competently, independently, impartially, and objectively. Here's USPAP's definition of bias: an inclination that precludes an appraiser's impartiality, independence, etc. If you look in the Fannie Mae Selling Guide, it doesn't define bias, but as it talks about bias, it limits it to race, color, religion, that kind of thing. Not to say that isn't bias, but you'll notice USPAP's definition of bias is much wider, and it is not limited to race, color, religion, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is another definition outside of USPAP, which we're not going to pay any attention to, quite frankly. I put it in here just as a comparison. Then this is the ethics rule. An appraiser must not perform an assignment with bias, which is defined here. Must not advocate the cause or interest of any party or issue. Must not perform negligently. So when we talk about bias, yes, we're talking about race, religion, blah, blah, blah. But we're also talking about anything that is going to cause the appraiser to prefer or incline him or herself away from impartiality, independence, objectivity, etc. And the point we're trying to make is the appraiser must be influenced by nothing other than the market. That's the only thing that can influence the appraiser. That's the only muse that can whisper into the appraiser's ear, nothing else. So a market-based adjustment has no appraiser bias. It has no unsupported assumptions or premises. This is right out of Standard Rule 1-3, which is the marketability and highest and best use standards rule. Please take a look at that. There are 5 components in USPAP to highest and best use. And the comment indicates the appraiser will not base a value opinion on an unsupported assumption or premise. Therefore, to say, yeah, there's a 5% busy road versus non-busy road adjustment is perfectly fine to say. But then the comment to Standard Rule 1-3 says that is not an unsupported assumption or premise. There is support behind that. And then a market-based adjustment is both true and correct, which is out of the certification standard, which is Standard Rule 2-3. So when we sign the certification, we say, I followed USPAP in arriving at my value conclusion, and I followed USPAP in reporting my value conclusion, meaning there are no unsupported assumptions or premises in the appraisal. Any questions on that? Okay, so let's talk about what we accomplished today. Did we learn about 5 ways to make a location adjustment? Yeah. Now, are they all as equally important? No, but that's up to the appraiser. But the point was, we wanted to go through 5 so everybody would have that tool in their toolbox. Were every one of those 5 supported out of the market? Yep. Some of them had better support than others, but they're all supported out of the market. Did we show how to communicate that adjustment to the client? Yeah, we went through that language. And again, please feel free to use that example. And if that isn't clear, get in touch with Scott, get in touch with me, and we'll help you write one. I mean, that's not a problem. Then we talked about bias and how the properly constructed adjustment helps prevent bias and to defend against it. Excuse me. And again, that's going to become a whole lot bigger as time goes on. And then here we are in this review. So again, there's Scott's email address. There's my email address. Please feel free to get in touch with us. Again, my phone number is 561-635-5265. I'll be happy to answer your calls. And some of you here have spoken to me in the past, so you know that I'm easily accessible to help answer your questions. And pleased to do so, by the way. Now, what we're going to do at this point is we're going to stop for any questions, which Scott's going to ask while I rejigger the screen for a second. So go ahead and ask Scott any questions you have. Oh, come on. Ask questions. Come on. You got to ask questions.
I see a whole bunch of stuff in chat, but I'm afraid to open it. I don't know how to use the chat part.
Just click on it, then it should pop open. And, let's see. I'm having trouble with this because I don't.
Hey, Scott, I'll jump in and ask. In the first set of adjustments, before you pull anything in for the adjustment techniques we just reviewed, I mean, you really look at your quantified items first. I mean, you can do time adjustments, your standard GLA, maybe something else that's easily quantifiable before you start marching off into what we just reviewed, correct?
Correct. Yeah, we're going through the grid in from top to bottom, but I don't think anybody does their adjustments in the grid from top to bottom. Personally, I like to start with market time adjustments, adjustments for concessions, and then I get right into, like you were saying, the things that are quantifiable. And to me, the best way to do that is to use something called depreciated cost, which we'll cover later on. Or there's other ways to do GLA adjustments, but we try to, and then we'll be talking about using secondary data for some of the adjustments that they're not quantified, but there's pretty good survey data that can be referred to. So, but it's definitely appraisers recognizing when they have good data, they use it, and when they don't trust it as much, they don't give it as much weight.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Okay, this is the spreadsheet that everybody had. Whoops, let's see. Okay, Jim asked a question regarding sensitivity analysis. Can you use that when you have multiple values? Okay, Jim, go ahead and chime in. Go ahead and unmute your microphone. I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. Or if you just want to type it, that's fine.
I think I know what he's asking.
Go ahead.
For instance, can you use sensitivity analysis to first find a location adjustment, make that adjustment, and then use it again to do an age adjustment? And the answer to that is, I'm not sure. It sounds kind of fishy to me. It's something I think it's called stepwise regression, and even the people in data science have questions about something called stepwise regression. In other words, are we inbreeding data, or are we actually, using the tool like it's supposed to be used? I tend to not use it more than once in the grid. I save that tool for something at the end that I can see is correlating with value, and it's hard to adjust by any other way. That's when I'll use sensitivity analysis. But I can show some examples here as we get into the grid, or as we get into the spreadsheet.
Yeah, which we're about to do. Jim, thank you. I appreciate your question. So does everybody see the tabs down here along the bottom? We're going to be looking at those. So basically what this page is when we talk about recognized methods, all we're saying is everything we've been through so far today is indeed a recognized method. So they're perfectly legitimate to use. However, your standard rule 1-1, this is 1-1A, just make sure that if you're going to use them, you understand them and correctly employ them. That's the big caveat there. And excuse me, Scott, you want to talk about quantitative adjustments versus qualitative adjustments?
Qualitative are things that are more judgment oriented. Like you're saying, this one is it's got more curb appeal, I guess. I don't really know too much. I haven't studied qualitative adjustments. I stick with quantitative, which has numbers involved. So the techniques that we've shown you are, paired data, group data, secondary data. Those are all right out of the Appraisal of Real Estate 15th edition. Statistical analysis, we haven't really gotten into that. Cost related adjustments, cost to cure and depreciated cost. We'll get into that later. Elsewhere in the Appraisal of Real Estate 15th, it says that paired data and adjusted pairs are variants of sensitivity analysis. That's why I include it. Those are two variants of something broader called sensitivity analysis. So we've got USPAP's warrant to use recognized methods, and we've got some recognized methods. I don't know if that's an exhaustive list, but to me, that's a good place to start.
Earlier, Lauro and I were talking about pools. How much value does a pool add? Well, Lauro gets the data, and he says, well, it adds $8,500 in value. And I get the data and say, well, no, it adds $10,000 in value. Well, the quantitative adjustment is somewhere between $8,500 and $10,000. The qualitative adjustment is Lauro says, well, that pool is nothing special. I'm going to adjust it at 85. And I say, well, I know a little bit about pools, and that's a nice pool, so I'm going to adjust it at 10. That's the quality difference. That the pool merits an adjustment is obvious. The market says 8,500 to 10. Just where? Well, that's a judgment call, and that is a qualitative adjustment. So let's, if you've got your spreadsheets open, let's go down here to the bottom tab, and let's go to paired data. And what you'll see is this is exactly what we looked at before. And this is set up. Scott set up MLS number over here just in case you needed to refer to it in the future. You'd know which one it was. But basically what happens is you put a number here, you put a number here, and this is set up to subtract one from the other. So you've got a whole bunch of these If you've got that many pairs, you've got a whole bunch of these. And as we talked earlier, what you do is you do 6, 8, 10 of these, how many ever you got, to try to determine if there is a central point to the individual pairings. And when you start to come across that central point, that's probably the adjustment. So again, you have this is here for you to fill out. Now, the way this is set up, you'll see that cell has a formula in it. Don't change that cell, because if you do, then you kick the math out of it and it won't work. So you can put numbers elsewhere. If there's nothing there, you can put numbers in it. If there's a formula in it, don't put any numbers in it. And the spreadsheet will calculate this for you.
And this is just a convenience. This is a place for you to archive your pairs if you find them, right? It's not saying that you need to find 8 of them for every job. If you find them, use them.
I'm sorry. Yeah, no.
Yeah, no, that's all right.
No.
So,
but yeah, here's your work file, and you finally find a pure pairing for a busy road versus a non-busy road. Okay, and over the years you find 8 of them. Well, okay, here they are. That's what Scott means by the archive. Then you'll notice the same thing here. This was exactly what we looked at when we were going through the PowerPoint presentations. Now, your GLA adjustment and your garage adjustment are going to have to come from your outside calculations. But then this gives you a place to put them, and as Scott was indicating, a place to archive them as well. And then you've got a bunch of these to play with. And then if you want to, you can just highlight them and copy them down, hit copy and paste, and there you got another one. So it's very straightforward in that. Then here are the grouped data. Now, Scott, go ahead and talk about that.
Right. And again, this is just a place for you to archive it, but this has got a formula in it to show you the change. To me, the important change is that the median price changed 5.2%. I just put taxes in here just because it's low-hanging fruit. It's something for you to look at. The year built didn't change at all. The bath count changed a little bit. The bedroom count changed a little bit. They kind of offset each other maybe. And the total square feet changed a little bit. It's just a way for you to look at how much is going on here besides the pure difference in location, right? So, and again, I don't use this often, but if you need to, here's a definition at the top. It shows what group data analysis is, straight out of the textbook. So secondary data, I think, is going to be more fun. Go to secondary data, the one before this. Okay, so if you enter a sale price here, instead of 400, Tim, type in 350.
Well,
or
maybe gotta move things around here.
If you'd like me to share my screen, I can do well, maybe it's still locked, huh?
It may be, Scott.
Okay.
All right. So let's see. You need to take me off host and make yourself host.
So how do I do that?
Very carefully.
So I take, but I don't, can you let me share my screen, or here, maybe I just can. Host disabled screen sharing. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry for the technical problems here. And Chris, you were asking me about where to get this. You can download it from my website, or I can send you a copy. But am I sharing my screen now?
I probably not.
Can you see?
There we go. Now try it.
Can you see a spreadsheet in front of you? No. Okay. Now you can see my screen.
Yes.
Okay, and it says recognized methods, like Tim's page 1 here. So here's secondary data. If you type the number 350 up here, whoop, I got to unprotect it. So review, unprotect sheet, and I need to type in Deb. So there's a lesson on how to unprotect the sheet. So now if I type in a comp sold for 350, the market value is 350 because there was no concessions. And these are the adjustments for location factors that we've gotten from our survey data. So backing to a water tower is an $18,000 adjustment based on a percentage applied to this $350,000. And what I've done here is taken the standard error so that you can see a low and a high range, statistically, a probable range for that adjustment. Here's the busy road, 14,000 to 17,000. If I change this to 100,000, now you can see the percentages, right? 5.19%, 4.2 to 4.9%, right? Because these are based on 100,000. So here's where you type your comp value. And if there were concessions, I take those out of market value. So here we go, 315 times the percentage from a survey, and here's the surveys, gives you this range of adjustments. So let's look at busy road. It's a $14,000 adjustment. The probable range is 13 to 15. If I change this here, I'll change this to 300,000 so you can see what's going on here. So here's the busy road adjustment. Frontage on a busy road, $13,756 is the mean, right? So here it is again, 13,000, it's rounding a little bit, but 13,007. So use this as secondary data. It's not the final answer, but type in the comp, sale price, subtract any concessions, and it will give you a probable range of adjustments based on this survey data.
Yeah,
And
Scott, let me jump in here 1 second.
Yep.
Dave just asked if everybody will be receiving the spreadsheet. Yes, Dave, everybody will be receiving the spreadsheet. And by the time you get it, it should be unlocked. But if it isn't, the code is D as in Delta, E as in Echo, B as in Bravo.
Right, and it's available for download in locked form, but after the session's over here, I'm going to turn this recording into 2 YouTube videos, and I will put links for those YouTube videos right here so that you'll get a spreadsheet from me by email that has the YouTube videos so you can watch this whole thing. Now, sensitivity analysis is the one that a lot of people are liking to use.
Scott, let me jump in one more time. Jamie, don't use all caps. It's capital D and then lowercase e and lowercase b. See if that works. And if that
Big D,
work,
little e, little
we'll
b.
figure something else.
Okay. So again, here we talked about these dummy variables. I used, instead of zeros and ones, I used ones and twos. 2 is higher, so it's a higher value. So that's the quiet street. 1 is the busy road. You just got to keep track of what you're representing here. But let's start over from scratch and say that we've got comp 1 has got a busy road, and it has an adjusted sale price of 450. And comp 2 has got a quiet street, and it's adjusted at 500. So here is the perfect R square, right? But it's based on adjusted sale prices. So I don't know how sure we can be about those because it's just 2 data points, right? This is really adjusted pairs. Here's another one that's got a quiet street that adjusts to 485. See what happened there? It split the difference between 500 and 485 and drew a line down to the busy road. We've got a 91% correlation. The adjustment is $42,000. Here's another one that is on a busy street. Let's say this one adjusted to 437.5. 437,500, not 437. So here again, now it's splitting the difference between the two busy road locations and drawing a line up to the average of the two quiet street locations, and it's indicating an adjustment of $48,000 for this busy road using the data that's already in your grid, okay? And we're just doing a location adjustment. Now, there could be a beneficial location, like on a golf course. So you could just say golf course, and you've got no golf course, and the adjusted sale price was 500,000. And you have a golf course, and it was 525. Anybody guess what that adjustment's going to be? Right, it's $25,000, right? So there it is. If you've got another one that was on the golf course that was 517, and again, this is the adjusted sale price. It's not the sale price. Then you've got another one off the golf course. Whoops, got to make that a number. And it was 489. So you can see the process here. These are the adjusted sale prices. These are dummy variables for that location. In this case, it's a beneficial location on a golf course. So most of our examples had to do with busy road, right? But there's also beneficial location characteristics. So we don't have surveys for the beneficial things. We only have it for the adverse locations. But you can always use the sensitivity analysis for that last adjustment if it happens to be a location feature like golf course or not a golf course. I had an interesting example, a friend of mine in Florida. He had houses with the big lot houses were in one gated community, and the small lot houses were in the other gated community. And it turns out that the location was really for the boat slips, right? The one gated community had boat slips. And he had adjusted sale prices like the no boat slip place was 350, and the boat slip location was 375. That would be an adjusted pair, right? So it's $25,000 for the boat slip. He's got another one that was not in the boat slip that was in his grid. Whoops. And another one that was from the location that did have the boat slips at 370. So now we've got all these adjusted pairs. Again, 1 with 2, 1 with 3, 1 with 4, 2 with 3, 2 with 4, 3, So there's the indication that you can show from the market that it should be a $20,000 adjustment for this location with boat slips. And you can, take screenshots of those. You can use them over and over again any way you want, but that's a way to use sensitivity analysis to do an adjustment for something that can be difficult to do other ways. And we've shown how hard it is to find pairs, adjusted pairs, group data, secondary data. So sometimes sensitivity analysis is the best tool that you've got. So now I think it'd be a good time to have people ask questions.
If this were a TV show, there would be the music and the rolling credits and so on and so forth, but it's not, so there aren't. It's just us. So please.
We've got 6 minutes, so
Yeah.
Fire away.
So, we got as much time as everybody needs. So go ahead and ask us the questions. Yeah, please.
So Scott, I'll ask a question.
Right.
So following on your boat slip example, let's say our community with boat slips, all the sales were last year, so you have no current sales.
Right.
And you find out you recently were assessed $5,000 for dredging.
Okay.
Would we make our adjustment for the assessment, for the $5,000 dredging assessment, then do the sensitivity analysis?
That's a really good question. I would say if they're from a prior market, you would want to think about making a time adjustment for sure if the market's increasing or decreasing. So these, but again, you're talking about, okay, here's our sales, no boat slip, boat slip. The ones with the boat slips had this assessment that goes along with owning the boat slip. Is that an assessment that lasts for years and years, or was it just 1 year?
I'll say it's like a once a decade event
Okay,
that comes along.
all right. You know, the only thing I've had similar to that was houses that had assessments for when the city sewer and water came through. It was a divorce case, and I was supposed to review an appraisal, and the appraisal made no adjustment for a house that had well and septic, when everybody knew that that was a looming bill coming due of about $10,000. So I just pointed that out, and I think my side won. I'm not sure, but Tim, do you have any thoughts on making adjustments for assessments? A one-time
I try to
assessment?
think as little as possible.
Okay,
Safely that way. Mark, I would say that if everybody was looking at the same assessment, I don't see that I don't see that would lower value by $5,000. I'd mention it, but I wouldn't make an adjustment for it because, you know, the property's worth $1 million, no matter what the assessment is. The point I'm trying to make is it's like, you know, you have $1 million house with an $800,000 mortgage and $1 million house with no mortgage. Well, just because one has an $800,000 mortgage, it has to be paid off. It doesn't affect its market value. It affects the seller's net at closing, but not the market value. So you would adjust upward for the time lapse without question. But I don't know that you would make a separate adjustment for the imposition of the special assessment for the dredging, unless it affected only one or two properties. But if it affects everybody in the subdivision, I don't see where that would make a difference in value. Mark, thank you. Scott, check the chat. There were two questions in there from Jen and from Jim, I think.
I don't know. I don't see how to check the chat.
Okay, let's see. Okay, Jen says, how many survey responses are in the secondary data? How recent are the responses? What markets are they from? And then Jim says, secondary data, would you use the adjustment value, say 10K, or a percentage adjustment when making your adjustments on the comparables in the grid?
Can everybody see this pure consensus? I'm assuming you can. Can you see it, Tim?
Yeah.
Okay. This is a website that I built so that I could hopefully attract agents to taking surveys, because, you know, really, do agent surveys mean more than appraiser surveys? I guess that's an open question, but we haven't had a lot of traction. We haven't gotten a lot of response from agents, but we do get responses from appraisers. So here's where you can find, again, pureconsensus.com. This is where you can find all of our surveys, and it will show you all the data we have. So for instance, here's the adverse location surveys, and these are what are repeated in the course. Here's a summary of what the consensus was. Here is how many we had in the sample, 81. When these were taken were, these are effective in December of last year, so they're more recent. We've had other surveys that we've published in our software that go back like 3 years. But my belief is that percentages will hold up over time, obviously much better than absolute adjustments. There has been a change from the last survey that we took. For instance, the bedroom count was different than this year. And I think it's because in the post-COVID market, people like more rooms, not necessarily for bedrooms, but for offices. And the other thing that was interesting is that the busy road location went down. So I don't know what that means. It was pretty similar, but this is the most current data, and it's available for anybody to see for free at pureconsensus.com. And here is the inspiration for the survey. You can watch this video and decide for yourself if you trust this data. This is a gentleman named Marcus du Sautoy. He is a high-ranking mathematician in England, and he takes us through a discussion of something that was discovered back in 1906 by a guy named Francis Galton, who's kind of the grandfather of statistics. But what he is saying is that if you have independent, decentralized, diverse points of view, in other words, independent means that they're not a bunch of people raising their hands in the room. Nobody's listening to anybody else when they make their answer. And those are aggregated. The wisdom of the crowd is what he's talking about, will give you a better result than one local opinion. Now there's room for discussion there. If our local opinion is based on data, wouldn't that be better than appraisers spread along all over the country? Well, I've been using the data for like 3-4 years now, and I found it to be really pretty good at narrowing my range among my comparables. You can kind of see when something works, right, if you're an appraiser. So I encourage you to watch that video. I don't think we should take the time to play it now. I did practice on how to play a video with system audio, but I don't think it's worth the risk. But pureconsensus.com, watch this video. It's only 5 minutes, and he'll explain how that was discovered and why it works. And that's what I'm trying to follow with our surveys, secondary data surveys.
Okay, Scott, we got 2 questions. One relative to sensitivity analysis. Can you use sensitivity analysis for linear or square footage of water frontage?
Well, yes. Let's say that you've got, you think that the properties are, the values are correlating to frontage. And I'm in Minnesota, the land of lakes, right? And everybody believes that how much lakefront you have drives the value. And I'd say that's true. I've seen cases when it's not true. But let's say this, well, what we're going to call this water frontage. And let's say that we'll start with a clean slate here. Let's say this one has 100 feet on the water, and it adjusted to $600,000. This is Minnesota lakefront properties, okay? And this one has 80 feet, and it adjusted for 580. This one has 125 square feet, and it adjusted for $610,000 after all the other adjustments. And this one has 75 feet on the water, and it adjusted for 615. So you can see that there's some correlation there, but it's actually going negative. It's because I got 606 million. Okay, so here we see that there is and I'm just making these numbers up, but here we have an example of a very low correlation between adjusted sale price and the water frontage. It's only a 0.08% adjustment, or correlation. Here's the best fit line. Here's these dots scattered all over. It's aptly named when they call it a scatter plot. And I tend to find this in my market. I did a property once that had 100 feet on the water, and the house next door only had 50 feet. But the one that had 100 feet also had a boat ramp right next to it. And nobody wants to live right next to the boat ramp unless they like to watch fist fights. And the 50-foot lot had the same view of the lake. It had the same access to the lake. So I don't really buy into water frontage as being a big driver, but you can look in your grid, adjust for everything besides the frontage, and see for yourself if the frontage makes a difference. Now, if this one was 200 feet, then you would see, oh yeah, it's an adjustment of $10 per foot, but it's only 36%.
You got 2,000.
I meant to say 200. Right, there we go. So there it is with 200 feet on the 615. So now we've got a decent correlation of 68%, and it's $244 per foot for the water frontage. But this works for anything that you see correlating with adjusted sale price. So you're at the bottom of the grid, you've done all of your adjustments, you think you've done a good job, and you see one thing that seems to be correlating with these adjusted sale prices. And you can see this general correlation that, hey, the 80-foot lot has the lowest adjusted value and the 200-foot lot has the highest adjusted value. What is the market paying per front footage? And it's $244 in this, with this set of facts.
And again, it's important to remember here, when you're doing sensitivity analysis, you've eliminated all the other differences. The only difference you can isolate is this one. It's the only,
Right.
it's the only difference you're testing. Let's see, Scott, Ed Gillespie hasn't gotten the workbook yet. So
Okay.
yeah, make sure he
We will send to the best of my ability. And if you don't get one by tomorrow, send me an email.
and we'll,
But
if we have to hand carry you one, we will get one there.
But the last time around, we were sending out links to the Zoom video, and a lot of people couldn't open them because they didn't have a Google account or something. So this time, my intention this afternoon is to make a recording, put it on YouTube so everybody can open it. I'll put the links to the recordings right up here and email this workbook right to you. If I've got your email correct, you'll get this. And when you open it up, it'll be unlocked and you will be able to click on the links to watch the video and then, play with these workbook pages.
Now, Lauro asked the question, if you have no or insufficient data for, say, $1 million sales, can you develop the adjustments from data where there is enough data? In other words, can you come up with, can you say, well, okay, I'm not dealing with $1 million houses, but can I get a percentage adjustment from looking at $500,000 houses?
Well, that's the premise here with secondary data, right? If this was $1 million house, then the adjustments would be much larger, but it's the same percentage. Now, I'm not saying that the percent is equal, because like earlier, what I've noticed in my market, just observing the market, things like a busy road have a huge effect on a very expensive house, and they have a very little effect on the idea of a house as shelter, right? Like first-time buyers, especially right now when the market's really hot, there's a lot of competition. I don't think people are paying attention to how busy the road is where they can buy their first house. But take this with a grain of salt. I would say if you've got very expensive houses, Ed, give me an example of what you want to adjust for.
That was Lauro.
Oh, Laurel, I'm sorry. But pretty much anything, if you've got adjusted sale prices, let's say they're $1 million houses. I can figure out how many zeros to use. And what are we adjusting for here, Tim?
Let's see. Lauro, I think, is typing. Lauro, you can go ahead and ask. Just unmute your microphone. Oh, okay. Lauro says time, GLA, site size.
Okay. Site size, we are going to do next week, or not next week, but next time. But just the reason I use sensitivity analysis is for things like age, okay? And this is getting to a little bit different topic, but as long as we're here, let's say you've got a 25-year-old house that you're appraising, and you've got a 28-year-old comp that adjusted to 350, and a 32-year-old comp that adjusted to 345. And then you have to use this 80-year-old comp for some reason, and it only adjusted to 325. There's a time adjustment, but you don't know how much. But with sensitivity analysis, you can show that there's a 98% correlation between age and adjusted value, and it's a $454 per year adjustment. So that's one way to use this. It can be used for site size, and we'll get into this later. Let's say that this one has a 14,000 square foot lot. And this one has a 13,500 square foot lot. and this one has a 12,000 square foot lot. The adjustment is $13 per foot. If this is the only difference, if site size is the only difference that's driving the value. So this is a very versatile tool. You can use it for pretty much anything in the grid, as long as this is the adjusted sale prices. And this is something that you can either take directly as a quantity like square footage, or you can do it like condition. We'll get into this next time. Condition, how do you spell condition? So this was a C3, and this was a C3, and this was a C4. The condition adjustment is 22.5. Again, adjusted values, now adjusting for condition. But there's a lot more to come on condition and quality and age, I think is what's coming up next. And again, I'll send you this spreadsheet. It'll have the links to the video. And if I miss anybody along the way, I'm learning how to use something called scheduling in Squarespace, but I haven't mastered it yet. I've clicked the wrong button a few times, and some people aren't getting what they're expecting. So send me an email and we'll do it the old-fashioned way.
Yeah, there are people at NASA wondering why they're getting spreadsheets from Scott. But, and they're, the CIA is now in front of his house watching him. Any other questions? And again, we're here to answer them. I mean, that's not a problem. And because we want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to ask us their questions.
Hello? I do have a question. I do have a quick question. I know we touched on sampling or assuming sample size for group and analysis, and we talked about there being 60 sales. Is it acceptable by USPAP standards to have less than 60, even though it may not be statistically significant? It would be my question. And then my follow-up is, I do want to, if you have that source or whatever, if you could email me that, I really would appreciate to see what the sample size source that you have. Does that make sense?
USPAP doesn't mention the issue. Scott, go back to go back to recognize methods. Yeah. Mark, if you can see that, basically what that says is, if you're going to use something, know how to use it and know what it means. Now, let's suppose that all you got 5 sales, period. Okay. And they're all different. Well, from those 5 sales, and they got a different GLA and a different aging condition, and a different site size, et cetera. What we've gone through here probably isn't going to work, simply because you don't have enough data. What you would have to do is you would have to set up what I call analog data. And you'd have to go out into your MLS, and you'd have to say, okay, MLS, talk to me about houses from 1,500 to 1,800 square feet that are over 20 years old, that are in C4 condition, blah, 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 and try to isolate the difference that way. But then that's basically group data, and that would work. Although you'd have to do that kind of grouping, that kind of work for every difference that you had. Whereas if you had 40 or 50 sales, you might be able to do straightforward multivariable regression analysis and get the answer that way. But Mark, one of the reasons we've gone through 5 separate ways to make adjustments is so that everybody understands there's more than one way to make an adjustment, and you use as many as you can, and then you say, okay, which do I like and why, which do I not like and why, and make your adjustment that way. But in other words, can you extract 5 adjustments from 5 sales? No, you just don't have enough data.
I mean, I guess my question is 20 to 30? Because I have done group analysis on 20 to 30 sales, and I in my opinion, the times I found support, I mean, it's not necessarily statistically significant, but I mean, the question is does it have to be to the level of statistically significant to be supported? I do agree with you with 5 sales is not enough, but I get that's obviously the tough question is 60 seems very unrealistic at times. Is 30 to 40, you know, overall acceptable, basically having 15 on each side? Is that not acceptable?
Well, Mark, okay, is it acceptable? Yes, it's acceptable with an explanation. And this is one reason that USPAP has a reconciliation standards rule. So you can go in and say, look, I did the best I could with the data I had, and the data I had weren't very good. So as a result, I came up with a value conclusion. I believe it's credible, but could it be even more credible if I had more data? Yeah, it would be even more credible if I had more data, but I didn't have any more data. So this is what you got. You know, this the hand I got dealt, and I did the best I could with the hand I got dealt. And this is the most credible number I can come up with. And you know, if you're dealing in Orange County, California, you probably have all the data you want. If you're dealing with Bozeman, Montana, you may not, but you do the best you can with the data you got. And then you explain your scope of work. Here's what I did. Here's why I did it. That's why we have a reconciliation standard and the opportunity to reconcile not only the 3 approaches, but the data and the quality and quantity of data within the approaches.
Now, I did find my reference. This is page 171 of Marvin Wolverton's book, Intro to Statistics for Appraisers. And he's citing the central limit theorem, which is beyond appraisal, that's math. He's saying that if there's a normal distribution, you can have less or 15 in the sample. A normal distribution is when it's a perfect bell curve. But he's saying that in real property, we rarely have any idea what the shape of that curve is. So therefore, 30 observations, N means observations, 30 or more generally applies to real property work. Now, it says generally, right? But that's my source, Marvin Wolverton, PhD, MAI. He knows what he's doing when it comes to, there's the book, Introduction to Statistics. And it's long, right? 417 pages long, but you can just search and find what you need. I just looked up central limit theorem and it took me right to it.
Appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Yep, sure.
Sure. What else? But that's why we generally try to stay away from real serious statistical analyses of real estate, because we just don't have the quantity of data to make it make sense. So we do the best we can. And that's one reason that sensitivity analysis works really well, so long as you're dealing with a single variable. It will not work with multiple variables.
Well, this is a handy place to at least stop the recording, because we'll be able to fit it on two videos.
Go ahead and stop the recording, but we'll stay here if you all have any more questions.
Okay, now I got to figure out how to stop the recording.
And this high technology.
I don't know if I can.
Well, let's see. How about if I go